My name is Daniel Berger. I am the Community Risk Reduction Division Manager. I lead our team here. I manage and supervise the Community Risk Reduction Division. Community risk reduction has a lot of different definitions depending on who you talk to. To me, it's a proactive and intentional use of resources based on local data and local needs. So what we're going to do with the community risk reduction model and how it differs from the traditional fire prevention model is we're going to study our community and we're going to know the risks that they face, and we're going to strategize with a plan and implement a plan to reduce those risks specific to that community. If I could further compare and contrast, fire prevention, traditional fire prevention it's almost like a safety defense, right? So traditional fire prevention is a safety defense where people are going to protect certain areas of the field regardless of what the offense is doing. And what community risk reduction is that it's very intentional and it's going to react to what the offense is doing. So if there's a shift on the offense, we're going to respond accordingly to try to prevent the offense from moving the ball. So there's a level of proactivity and there's a level of intentionality with community risk reduction. The hallmark of a community risk reduction model is the community risk assessment. And the community risk assessment is a study of our community. We look at several different factors of our community, right? We look at our community profile and demographics. So who makes up our community? Because we know that fire doesn't impact everybody equally. So for example, fire impacts the very old, the very young, the non-English speaking, those that live in poverty to a greater degree. So if we know where those target areas are and where there are clusters of those numbers, we can target some of our efforts to those areas. The benefit for the fire department, it's a benefit for the community and it's a benefit for the fire department. It makes sure we're using the right resources for the right problem. And the benefit to the community is a more efficient use of their taxpayer dollars. We know that we're using our resources in a way that is directly related to improving their quality of life. We are involved with pre-construction meetings, pre-construction development meetings with new projects and new developments. We do plans review for all those new developments. So every new building that comes in our jurisdiction comes through our office to make sure that all the fire safety features that are in place for both the occupants and the firefighters are there. So for example, does the building have adequate access? If there's a fire, can our fire trucks or can our ambulances get to the building? Does it have enough fire flow? If there is a fire in that particular building, will we have enough water to suppress a fire? Are there enough doors located in a strategic enough way to where people can get out safely and exit safely? Can our firefighters get in with their equipment? Are the corridors rated correctly to make sure that the fire spread doesn't impede people getting in, or our fire crews going in or people getting out rather? The private industry has been using data for years, right? All these private entities to know who to market to know who to sell to. And we're just now figuring out on our side how to use data effectively. And I mentioned the data, the local data and the demographics of who we serve, who makes up our population, knowing that different people groups are affected by fire in different ways. So if we can recognize trends also in our calls and the types of calls that we're doing, we can focus efforts to reduce those calls. So for example, anecdotally, you talk to any firefighter in operations and they're going to tell you we run a lot of false alarm calls, a lot of false fire alarm calls. And anecdotally, that's true, but you need to have some data to back it up to understand just how big the problem is, to know how important we need to make it in terms of mitigating it. So how big of a problem is it? And through our study, through the community risk assessment, we found that about 7% of all calls were false alarm calls. So over a 5-year period, we ran over 3,000 calls that were false alarms. And the risk with that seems minimal at face value, but then you start thinking about what it does to the occupants in terms of desensitizing them to where the next time they hear an alarm, they know it's nonsense and they don't have to exit the building, when in fact it may be a real fire. You talk about what it does to our crews, waking them up in the middle of the night, responding to a call that ultimately bears no fruit. It's harmful for their bodies physiologically for that to happen over and over again. And while it's well worth it, most of the time on a real emergency, the redundancy of going to these false alarm calls, I think is frustrating. And also, you look at it from a cost standpoint. This wear and tear on our vehicles for false alarm, it adds up over time. In fact, through our analysis, we found that we're spending, roughly $230,000 a year on operational costs responding to these false alarm calls. So, does it matter? Yeah, I mean, when you put it in numbers like that and you look at the local data, you see, yeah, this is kind of a real problem. We should focus our efforts on reducing the amount of false alarm calls we run in the district.